The doctors won't say it, but you can tell from their eyes. Your time is running out. As you lie in the hospital bed, the minutes slipping away, your mind is racing. Ready or not, you're about to go on the biggest mystery that humanity has never been able to solve, into the unknown of death. Time seems to slow down in your last moments as you become more aware of every sensation. You can feel your breath starting to slow down, and you wonder if you'll know when you're dying or if you'll just slip away quietly. Will it be painful? Will you discover what lies beyond this mortal coil? Or will it just be like going to sleep? While your body is dying, what's your brain doing? What happens to the brain while the body is breathing its last? The human brain, 3.3 pounds of tissue, a mix of gray matter and white matter that serves as the control center for the entire body, composed of countless nerve cells and divided into 4 lobes, the frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes. It handles the senses and all mental functions. It leads to the brainstem, which controls the basic functions of the organs like the circulatory and respiratory systems, the spinal cord, which controls motor function, and the millions of nerves that control every little function in the body. The brain is like the general commander in an army of countless soldiers in your body, so it's not a surprise that you can't survive without it in working order. What happens to the brain at the moment of death? That depends on how you're dying. The first situation is when the brain kills the body. This is when the brain sustains a massive injury that makes it impossible for it to sustain the body. This happens when the brain is pierced by a bullet, hit by a large blunt object like a falling rock, or is badly concussed in a car accident or a sports game. It can also happen non-violently when a blood vessel bursts in the brain, causing a stroke or brain aneurysm that floods the brain, drowning the vital nerves that keep things running. In a case like this, the brain shuts down quickly, often before the body realizes what happens. There's no time to process what's happening at the moment of death because the brain is the first to go, and the body soon follows. Sometimes the lower brain functions of the brainstem are preserved, and this is called brain death. The body is technically alive, but there's no consciousness left, and the person is usually taken off life support shortly. But what happens when the body is the first to go? The brain needs the body to be functioning so it can get the life-sustaining oxygen it needs to keep running. If the brain can't breathe and the circulatory system can't get blood to the brain will start starving and eventually die. This is common when other parts of the body are injured, such as a wound to a critical organ. It can also be caused by a heart attack, an illness like cancer, or old age as the body's organs start to slow down and wear out. There are more chances for medical intervention to save a life in this case, but there's only so much doctors can do and eventually time will run out. This is when the brain shuts down slowly and the people experience the sensation of dying while fully conscious. But how will we know what people experience? No one's been there and back. Or have they? Many people have claimed to have near-death experiences when they came close to death but were pulled back. This is common when someone has a traumatic and sudden physical ailment that brings them to the point of death and always involves the body but not the brain. Survivors of heart attacks, severe allergic reactions, surgical complications, or car accidents often recall making contact with something they believe is the afterlife. Doctors say this is the result of the lack of oxygen to the brain, causing hypoxia and hallucinations that feel especially intense given the trauma of the experience. But what do they see? And is it proof that death is not the end of the road? Most of the people who report this phenomenon are deeply religious and are intensely convinced that they made contact with heaven or somewhere else. When 3-year-old Colton Burpo underwent emergency surgery for a burst appendix, he nearly died on the operating table and came back with incredible stories of what heaven was like, including details of a long-dead relative he couldn't have known. He and his father wrote a book, Heaven is for Real, about his experience, but many critics say there are holes in the story and Colton was never clinically dead during the surgery. Another boy with a similar story, Alex Malarkey, later revised his own claims as a teenager. Paralyzed in a terrible car crash as a child, he woke up from a coma and claimed he'd been carried by an angel during his near-death experience. But in 2015, he claimed that he had made the whole incident up and had never even read the Bible at the time of his injury. But what about those who saw the other place? When Matthew Botsford walked out of a restaurant and into the middle of a gun battle in 1992, he was struck by a bullet and wound up in a coma. He claimed to wind up in a place of total blackness and horror until he was lifted out of there by a figure he believed was God and returned to his body. He woke up after 27 days and recovered over a 2-year period, and he and his wife wrote a book about his close encounter with hell. But doctors are even more skeptical about his story because of the added factor of his brain injury. The brain is a complex organ, and a bullet inside it during a near-death experience could easily conjure up some horrifying visuals for the victim. The survivors of near-death experiences have their beliefs about what happens at the point of death, but what do scientists say? Ever since the technology was available, scientists have been studying the moment of death for clues to what happens to people. While no one knows exactly what the dying is experiencing and whether it points to something bigger, they have observed some amazing patterns in brain activity. Using EEG or electroencephalogram technology to track the activity in the brain, they've discovered that brain activity actually flares at the moment of death. When researchers tested the brain activity of rats that were euthanized, they discovered that the animal's consciousness was even more alert and intense than the normal waking state. Within 30 seconds of an induced cardiac arrest, the brain goes into overdrive. It implies something shocking. The brain doesn't die when the body does. How long can the brain survive after the body stops functioning? Most scientists believe it was only seconds, but doctors at a Canadian intensive care unit discovered something disturbing while working with terminally ill patients in 2018. After life support was turned off for 4 patients and they were declared dead, one of the patient's EEG continued to show brain activity for up to 10 minutes. There was no pulse and the pupils didn't retract when tested with light, but the patient's brain activity resembled the same frequency as deep sleep. Does the body simply put the brain to sleep and let it expire quietly during a non-traumatic death? Or is the dying person experiencing something more intense? One theory about the brain at the moment of death is called the dark wave. First observed in 1940 in experiments on rabbits, it indicated that when the brain is injured, it starts to spread brain death out from the injured spot. Brain functions go down one by one, drowning the brain in a deep wave of depressions as brain activity slowly decreases. This would mean the final moments of the brain function are likely confusing, disorienting, and marked by an increased loss of awareness. This is most common with death caused by brain injury, but what happens when the brain is expiring due to the loss of body function? Another theory proposes a much more optimistic view of our last moments. Many people have observed that those dying, even those in palliative care as they expire from terrible illness, have a peaceful or even euphoric expression on their face in their last hours. A study of rats at the moment of death indicated that the levels of serotonin in the blood tripled in their last minutes. Serotonin is a chemical believed to contribute to feelings of happiness and is matched by the powerful endorphins which have the same effect. If one of the body's last functions as it shuts down is to release these chemicals, it's likely that they take away the pain and the fear of death and allow the person to pass peacefully, enjoying a natural high that takes the edge off those last moments. But what's going through the mind in those last moments? Are people too far gone, or do they still know what's going on around them? The question of awareness around or even after the moment of clinical death has been puzzling scientists for many years, and new studies indicate that a person's consciousness can persist even after the bodily functions stop. A study of cardiac arrest survivors indicates that they correctly remember things that were said around them after their heart stopped. Those who were clinically dead may even remember having their deaths announced by medics and may be fully aware as their body functions fail them. These people were only dead for a short period and were revived through life-saving medicine, but it's likely that those who didn't get revived from their heart attack have the same experience in their last moments. The brain is a complex and durable organ, and it may have the ability to outlive the body briefly. What does this tell us about the moment of death? And is it possible to use this to learn more about what lies beyond? People have long been fascinated with the idea of conquering death or getting answers about it, and many stories have been written about people exploring the great beyond or returning from it. A horror movie, Flatliners, depicted a group of students who performed an experiment to stop their body functions and then resurrect themselves under a controlled environment. They came back wrong and developed strange new powers that led to carnage because it was a horror movie. But that hasn't stopped scientists from trying to figure out what people who have near-death experiences and came back from being clinically dead experienced. To get closer to the truth, we've got to look at the person who had the longest journey. Velma Thomas was 59 when she was taken to a West Virginia hospital for signs of a heart attack. She went downhill quickly and was pronounced brain dead when it was determined that she had no brain activity. Doctors tried to save her life by inducing hypothermia to lower her body temperature, but it was for naught, and her family was left to make funeral plans. But Thomas was an organ donor, and she was kept on life support for more than half a day until it was time to harvest the organs for transplant. That delay saved her life. It was 17 hours later, and the signs of death were setting in. Her son observed her skin hardening and her hands and toes starting to curl. But shortly after the family made the decision to take Velma off life support and no heartbeat was detected, something amazing happened. She started moving, and at first people thought it was just reflexes, but then she coughed and moved her eyes. And by the time her son returned to the hospital, his mother was already asking for him. She went on to make a full recovery and appeared on TV talk shows. But as for what she remembered about her time under, the answer seems to be nothing. And if she does, she's keeping it close to her chest. The evidence is that the brain is highly active at the moment of death, especially as someone dies from reasons other than brain injury. Those who have recovered from near-death experiences often have amazing stories, but those could easily be the result of hallucinations caused by unusual brain activity or oxygen deprivation. It seems to find out the truth of what happens to the brain at the moment of death, there's only one way to find out, but those who know aren't telling tales. For more on the mysteries of death, check out What Happens When You Die, or watch Dumbest Ways to Die for some unusual ways to get there.